New Zealand broadcaster Orini Kaipara is the first TV journalist in the world with a face tattoo. It's a traditional face marking worn by female descendants of the Maori, the indigenous Polynesian people of what is now New Zealand. Here's a rare view of Niagara Falls when it was completely dried up in 1969 for the first time in 12,000 years. Knickers the Australian steer has been deemed too big to be slaughtered. Standing at 6'4" and weighing nearly 3,000 pounds, the cow is so massive that it wouldn't even fit in the butchering equipment. Sadly, this other cow wasn't so lucky since it was turned into a deliciously rare flank steak. In 2015, an 87-year-old Chinese woman visited doctors to address the 5-inch horn growing out of her forehead that began as a mole. It's made out of the same material as fingernails and can be easily trimmed down in the same way. In 2003, a skeleton measuring 6 inches long was found in a remote part of Chile's Atacama Desert. Due to its elongated skull and rather developed bones considering its size, the specimen was initially rumored to be an alien. But after extensive testing, scientists determined that it was more likely the skeleton of a stillborn human girl that had close to 70 different genetic mutations. According to a recent study, people in the US who were born before 1996 have a slightly lower IQ than those born afterwards. This is due to the negative effects of leaded gasoline, which was finally banned completely on January 1st, 1996. In 1924, gifted college students Leopold and Loeb planned out the perfect murders simply to demonstrate their superior intellectual abilities. But after kidnapping and murdering a child, they left an abundance of evidence and were swiftly convicted of murder. A little girl from Seattle became friends with a group of crows that she feeds in exchange for gifts. The items they bring her are typically shiny and have included pieces of glass, buttons, and even lost jewelry. It's one of the first recorded cases of birds giving gifts to humans. In fact, crows are one of the smartest non-primate animals on the planet. Research has shown that they're aware of what they know and can ponder the content of their own minds, a level of analytical thought that scientists used to think only belonged to humans and higher mammals. They've discovered the use of basic tools, understand how stoplights and vending machines work, and have long-term facial recognition skills. Meaning if you piss off a crow, it can end up holding a grudge against you for years. Crows have even been known to hold funerals and will avoid areas that are deemed dangerous for birds, meaning they understand the concept of death and fear it. In 2010, 55-year-old Greg Flanagan was found dead on the floor inside of his locked hotel room in Texas. There were no signs of a break-in or robbery, as Greg's wallet was still in his back pocket with cash inside. He had suffered no obvious external injuries, but had massive internal damage, including broken ribs, damage to his liver and intestines, and a hole through his heart. Flanagan's death was soon ruled an unsolved homicide, despite coroners having no idea what actually happened to him. After an 8-month investigation, it was revealed that he died from a 1-in-a-million series of events. A drunk guest in the next hotel room accidentally fired a single bullet through the wall while playing with his pistol. While Flanagan was laying down watching Iron Man 2, the bullet hit him directly in the scrotum and continued up through his body and through his heart, likely killing him moments after he stood up and stumbled toward the door. Lance Moeller was later sentenced to 10 years in prison for his neighbor's bizarre accidental murder. Queen Elizabeth had 2 first cousins named Nerissa and Catherine who were severely disabled. Nerissa was publicly pronounced dead in 1940, while her sister Catherine was said to have died in 1961. But it was later revealed that they were both tucked away in a mental asylum until their actual deaths in 1986 and 2014. These were just some of the many wedding rings that were taken from Holocaust victims at Buchenwald concentration camp. Paul McCartney decided not to tell his wife Linda that her cancer progressed and had become terminal. He didn't think it would do her any good if she knew, so she continued riding her horse until the day before she died. In August of 2001, actor James Woods reported 4 suspicious men on his flight, but authorities didn't take his claims seriously. Turns out they were 4 of the hijackers who ended up crashing into the Twin Towers on 9/11. Some of Tom Holland's darkest experiences have happened both on and off screen. His breakout role came in The Impossible, based on a family that survived the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, which killed more than 225,000 people across 14 countries. 7-year-old Holland met the real family and heard firsthand what they endured. Years later, he starred in The Crowded Room as a mental case inspired partly by Billy Billy Milligan, who claimed to have 24 different personalities and became the first person acquitted of major crimes in the US due to dissociative identity disorder. Holland said the psychologically intense role left him so emotionally drained that he took a year off from acting. Around the same period, he was confronting his own dark relationship with alcohol. After attempting Dry January in 2022, Holland realized he was constantly thinking about alcohol, struggled to socialize without it, and felt he needed to drink to relax after stressful days on set. He became concerned by just how difficult it was to stop, later admitting, "I was definitely addicted to alcohol." Holland eventually pushed himself to stay sober for 6 months, saying he became noticeably happier, healthier, and better able to handle problems. He ultimately quit drinking altogether and has remained sober ever since. Here's an incredible photo of one of the rarest wild animals in the United States, a wild jaguar captured on a trail cam in southern Arizona. Jaguars once roamed from California to Louisiana, but hunting and habitat loss over the years eliminated them from the US by the mid-20th century. Now, after decades of absence, a small number of wild males have begun returning from Mexico, giving scientists hope the species may be reclaiming part of its historic range. There are still no known breeding females in the United States, so every trail cam photo is considered an extremely rare glimpse of America's largest native cat. This picture was accidentally left behind by a woman who helped build the first iPhones. In 2008, a Foxconn factory worker forgot to delete her camera's test photos before the phone was shipped off to a customer in Britain. After he posted them online, the smiling worker became an instant internet sensation known simply as iPhone Girl. Here's a photo of a nuclear explosion less than 1 millisecond after detonation. At this moment, the fireball was only about 66 feet across, but already millions of degrees, roughly 3 times hotter than the surface of the sun. The spikes hanging beneath it are steel support cables being instantly vaporized into glowing plasma. The image was captured in 1952 using an ultra-high-speed camera, revealing the first moments of a nuclear explosion in a way the human eye never could. Despite suffering from stomach cancer, Raul Julia accepted the role of M. Bison in the 1994 Street Fighter movie because his children were huge fans of the games and wanted to see their father play the villain. He pushed through filming while seriously ill, then suffered a stroke and died aged 54 in 1994, just days before the movie made it to theaters. Just a few weeks before earning her college degree, Sherilyn Kahelig was killed in a car accident. At her graduation, her grieving father carried a life-size cardboard cutout of her through the ceremony and accepted her diploma on her behalf. Sherilyn had dreamed of graduating so she could lift her family out of poverty, and her younger brother has vowed to carry on that dream in her honor. In September of 1975, Marine veteran Oliver Sipple grabbed the arm of a woman as she pointed a loaded revolver at President Gerald Ford, causing her assassination attempt to fail by mere inches. But instead of becoming known as the man who saved a president, Sipple was involuntarily outed as gay as activists in the media publicized his sexuality, leading to a permanent estrangement from much of his family. He struggled with severe depression, alcoholism, and isolation for years afterward, and died alone in his San Francisco apartment in 1989 at just 47 years old, his body reportedly not being discovered for nearly 2 weeks. After Christopher Reeve was thrown from his horse in 1995 and paralyzed from his shoulders down, he told his wife Dana from his hospital bed that she should take their son and move on because she hadn't signed up for a life like this. But she simply replied to him, "You're still you, and I love you." Reeve later said that was the moment he realized he wanted to keep living. Dana gave up her acting and singing career to become his full-time caretaker and remained by his side until his death in 2004 at age 52. Then just 17 months later, Dana died of lung cancer at 44 years old despite never having smoked, leaving their 13-year-old son Will without either parent. Lucy Humphrey was told she only had a few years left to live after kidney failure caused by lupus. But during a beach trip in 2021, her Doberman Indy kept running over to a stranger named Katie James, sparking a conversation that eventually led to Katie volunteering to be tested as a donor. She turned out to be a perfect kidney match, with doctors saying the odds of finding someone with such a closely matched blood type and tissue profile were about 1 in 22 million. Katie donated one of her kidneys in 2022, giving Lucy a second chance at life, and later called it the best thing I've ever done. Joey Jordison was the founding drummer of Slipknot and one of the most influential figures in modern metal, known for his blistering speed, chaotic precision, and aggressive stage presence. He was instrumental in writing much of the band's early music and helped define their sound during their rise to fame. But in 2013, fans were shocked when he was suddenly fired from the band without explanation. Years later, Jordison revealed he had been silently battling transverse myelitis, a rare neurological disorder that left him temporarily unable to walk or play drums. Despite recovering and launching new projects, he never returned to Slipknot. On July 26, 2021, Jordison died in his sleep at just 46 years old, and no official cause of death was ever made public. In July of 2025, 44-year-old Thawisak Namwangsa was found dead in his bedroom after reportedly surviving for nearly a month on nothing but beer. Over 100 empty bottles surrounded his body, forming a narrow path to his bed. He had refused food and water following a bitter divorce, and is believed to have suffered a fatal seizure before paramedics could reach him. Cop killer Donald Eugene Webb was on the FBI's most wanted list for more than 25 years, longer than anyone else at the time, and was never captured. It was later discovered that his wife had been hiding him inside a secret room in her home for nearly 2 decades, and buried him in her backyard after he died from a stroke. Victoria Wright was born with cherubism, a rare genetic disorder that causes the bones in the lower face to grow erratically, giving her a swollen, distorted appearance that drew cruel comments from strangers her entire life. The condition can be extremely painful by tightening the jaw, straining the facial nerves, and making basic things like chewing or even speaking very difficult at times. As a child, she endured constant looks, bullying, and even adults snickering about her in public as if she wasn't standing right there. But instead of hiding, she turned her diagnosis into a mission, calling out the cruelty she faced after a BBC documentary sparked a wave of online abuse, and becoming a fierce advocate for people with facial differences. In 2015, Mary Cerruti vanished from her Houston bungalow without a trace. 2 years later, the new owners found her skeletal remains sealed inside a wall along with her glasses and shoes. Investigators believe she fell through the attic floor and became trapped, slowly dying alone in total darkness with no way of climbing out. But because she was one of the last homeowners refusing to sell as developers closed in around her, many people still suspect something darker. Her official cause of death remains undetermined. California nurse Diana Sanders was served at least 14 tequila shots over an 8.5-hour period during a Carnival cruise before blacking out and falling down a staircase. She suffered a concussion, a possible traumatic brain injury, chronic headaches, neck, back, and tailbone injuries, along with extensive bruising that she said left her unable to work for months. A federal jury later found Carnival responsible for over-serving her alcohol and awarded Sanders $300,000 in damages. Carnival has said it plans to appeal. According to researchers, wild animals are twice as likely to flee from the sound of calm human conversations as compared to the growls of lions. In South Africa's Greater Kruger National Park, scientists played recordings of calm human voices, hunting sounds, lion growls, and the sounds of other animals at watering holes. They found that 95% of the 19 mammal species tested, including elephants, giraffes, leopards, hyenas, zebras, and warthogs, showed much stronger fear responses to humans than to their natural predators, often fleeing more quickly and staying away for longer. The findings reinforce scientists' description of humans as Earth's ultimate super predators. In 1951, Mary Reeser was found almost entirely burnt to ashes in her armchair, with only her lower leg, backbone, and shrunken skull still remaining, while the rest of her Florida apartment showed very little fire damage. Though many speculated that it was a case of spontaneous human combustion, experts believe that she accidentally ignited herself while smoking and burned under a rare phenomenon known as the wick effect, where her clothing caught fire and her body fat acted like a human candle, fueling a slow, smoldering blaze that consumed her from within. To this day, the case remains one of the most chilling fire deaths ever recorded. In 1761, a French ship carrying 160 Malaysian slaves crashed into the barren Tromelin Island, resulting in 100 of them drowning while shackled below deck. The surviving 60 slaves were forced to build a raft for the fleeing French crew, who promised they'd return but never did. Stranded on a small desolate sandbar with no trees, no fresh water, and no hope, the abandoned slaves endured 15 harrowing years. They scavenged shipwrecked debris for crude shelter and tools, drank rainwater when it fell, hunted seabirds and turtles to stave off starvation, and managed to keep a fire burning despite there being no trees on the island. When rescue finally arrived in 1776, the island held only 7 emaciated women and a single infant. Joe Biden was born closer to Abe Lincoln's presidency than to his own. If someone born today were sworn in at age 78, the same age Biden was, they would become president in the year 2106. When the microchip was invented in 1958, Belgium was still displaying people from the Congo in human zoos. T-Rex lived closer in time to humans than to the Stegosaurus. Jack the Ripper was actively murdering people, Van Gogh painted Starry Night, the Eiffel Tower was completed, and Nintendo was founded, all in the year 1889. The 10th U.S. President, John Tyler, who was born in 1790, has grandchildren that are still alive today. The last widow of a Civil War veteran just died in 2020. 17-year-old Helen Jackson married 93-year-old James Bolin in 1936 so that she could claim his military pension after he died. And lastly, there are more slaves today than at any point in the history of the world. The New Mexico Penitentiary riot of 1980 was by far the most violent prison riot in U.S. history. It started because of prolonged issues like overcrowding, poor conditions, and mistreatment of inmates. But it quickly turned horrific as inmates took total control of the prison and held 12 officers hostage. Several inmates were killed by other prisoners, with some being tortured and mutilated because they were labeled as snitches. The carnage that took place in Cell Block 4 was particularly atrocious. One inmate was blowtorched in the face and eyes until his head literally exploded. Another inmate, shoplifter Mario Urioste, who had previously filed a lawsuit after being gang raped by 7 men, was a direct target for revenge. His body was found hanged with his throat cut and his dismembered genitals stuffed into his mouth. Police finally regained control of the prison 36 hours after the riots had begun. By then, 33 inmates were killed and more than 200 were treated for injuries. In 1983, 22-year-old Michael Anderson Godwin was sentenced to death by electric chair after brutally murdering a young woman in South Carolina. But the electrocution ruling was later overturned, and Godwin was only handed a life sentence. A few years later, he was sitting on his toilet while trying to connect his headphones to his TV when he bit down on the wire and was electrocuted to death. In 2019, a man was using Google Earth to check out his old neighborhood when he happened to stumble upon something spooky. A car containing the remains of a man who'd been missing for 22 years. 40-year-old William Molt was reported missing in 1997 when he failed to return home after leaving a nightclub. Here's a 1989 photo of South African spear fisherman Geerjo van Niekerk showing off his recent bite mark from a great white. He told reporters it was a 1 in a million freak accident. While diving near Cape Town just 2 months afterwards, Geerjo went missing until his shark-bitten leg washed ashore a few days later. 42. Earlier this year, 24-year-old French student Matthew Latour received a hair transplant in Turkey so that he could finally grow a beard. But the result looked atrocious as Latour found out it was performed by a real estate agent, not a licensed surgeon. Upon learning the damage was irreversible, he ended his life. From the 70s to the 90s, more than 20 people were killed by postal workers in at least 40 separate incidents. It happened so frequently that going postal became a slang term for becoming exceptionally angry. This was referenced in the 1996 Jumanji movie when the hunter goes to a sporting goods store to replace his gun, and the salesman asks him, "You don't work for the post office, do you?" In June of 2007, a 6-year-old girl unknowingly sat on the poorly maintained drain of a public pool. The resulting suction from the drain caused 21 feet of her intestines to be forced out of her body. After 16 surgeries and several transplants, she tragically died 9 months later. This is one of the worst cases of Munchausen syndrome by proxy ever seen by doctors. For years, Kelly Ronahan was thought to be suffering from a mysterious illness that caused her to frequently lose blood and required weekly transfusions. But once doctors started catching on that Kelly was likely draining her own blood to appear anemic, she moved on to a new health issue. She allegedly started picking at her legs, putting chemicals on them, and rubbing all sorts of substances and dirt into the wounds. Soon enough, her legs got so bad that Kelly needed a muscle transplant and skin grafts to cover up the holes. After being discharged from the hospital, she continued picking at the scabs and causing further damage, eventually turning parts of her legs black. It got to the point where she nearly died from sepsis and required both of her legs to be amputated. Kelly gleefully documented her whole medical journey on social media, posting hundreds of photos and videos of her progress over the years. But in the end, she reportedly did it all for internet sympathy. In 1995, 13-year-old Thad Phillips was kidnapped while he was asleep in his Wisconsin bedroom. He'd been abducted by 17-year-old Joseph Clark, a local boy who was obsessed with the sound of bones breaking. Over 48 grueling hours, Clark broke both of the boy's hips, legs, shins, and ankles with his bare hands. Phillips eventually managed to escape from the nightmare and reported Clark to police. Sometime later, Phillips was sitting at home awaiting the trial when one of Clark's friends rang the doorbell and shot Phillips twice in the back, apparently to prevent him from testifying. Clark was sentenced to life in prison, and Phillips was eventually able to walk again. In 2008, Indigenous Canadian man Brian Sinclair went to the hospital because of a blocked catheter. After many hours passed in the waiting area, other patients began to urge medical staff to attend to Sinclair, who was clearly in pain, but they responded that they were helping other patients and would eventually get to him. After 34 hours had passed, Sinclair ended up dying in the waiting room and had already developed rigor mortis by the time medical staff attended to him. Turns out he had a very treatable bladder infection and could have easily been saved. Mary Bell was only 10 years old when she committed 2 shocking murders in 1968, making her one of the youngest known child killers in modern history. Raised in a violently abusive home in Newcastle, England, Mary first killed 4-year-old Martin Brown by strangulation after telling him his neck looked sore and offering to massage it. She then returned to the scene days later to leave taunting notes saying that she would kill again. 2 months later, she murdered 3-year-old Brian Howe in the same way, not only strangling him but also mutilating his body with scissors and carving the letter M into his stomach. Along with her 13-year-old accomplice Norma Bell, Mary was arrested and showed no remorse during her interrogation. In court, she was only convicted of manslaughter due to her young age and served 12 years in prison before being released with a new identity. Mary and her daughter were granted lifelong anonymity by the court as her current whereabouts are unknown. In 2017, a 10-year-old Australian boy named Matthew Mitchell was bitten by the highly venomous funnel web spider. He was rushed to the hospital while experiencing life-threatening symptoms and was given 12 vials of antivenom, the largest dosage ever administered. The boy made a full recovery, and the spider that bit him is now part of the venom milking program that produces the antivenom. Isadora Duncan was one of the most famous dancers of the early 1900s who is often credited with creating modern dance. But after leaving a show in 1927, her trademark long scarf got caught in the wheel axle of her new convertible. Her neck was immediately broken and she was declared dead on arrival at the hospital. In Buenos Aires in 1988, a poodle suddenly fell from an apartment balcony and landed on the head of a 75-year-old woman, killing her and the dog instantly. Just then, another lady who witnessed the strange incident from the middle of the road continued to stand there in bewilderment, resulting in her being fatally struck by a passing bus. Upon witnessing both events, an elderly man then died of a heart attack out of shock. All of this chaos reportedly happened in less than a minute. During the Sandy Hook school shooting in 2012, 27-year-old elementary teacher Vicky Soto died a hero while saving her students from the gunman. After hearing gunshots from outside, she quickly hid her first graders in the classroom closet and refused to hide herself. When the shooter came to her room, she told him that her students were in the gym, after which some of the kids ran from their hiding spots in a panic. The shooter opened fire, but Soto shielded the children with her body as they escaped, saving 11 young lives while sacrificing her own. Nicknamed the Saint of Auschwitz, Maximilian Kolbe was a Polish Catholic priest who offered to die in the place of a concentration camp prisoner who was condemned to die of starvation. After surviving for several weeks, Kolbe was eventually killed by an injection of acid. The man he sacrificed himself for lived on for another 50-plus years and dedicated his life to telling Kolbe's story. In 1982, the Pope canonized Kolbe and declared him a martyr of charity. Actor Daniel Hovels accidentally slit his own throat on stage during a 2008 theatrical performance after his prop knife was somehow switched out for a real one. The audience initially thought it was all just an elaborate special effect. The blade had just barely missed Hovels' carotid artery, but he was back on stage the next day. The leading cause of death for pregnant and postpartum women in America is homicide. This is often driven by partner violence that is escalated or triggered by the pregnancy, stemming from jealousy, fear of responsibility, and financial stress. In 2014, a crematorium in Virginia caught fire during the cremation of a 500-pound body. The excessive body fat caused the furnace to overheat, igniting the building's roof. A Florida musician known as Prince Midnight constructed a fully functional electric guitar he dubbed the Skelecaster, using the skeletal remains of his deceased Uncle Philip. Philip had donated his skeleton to a medical college in Greece, but after 2 decades, the school no longer had any use for them, so the remains were returned to his family. Prince Midnight decided to honor his uncle, who introduced him to heavy metal music, by turning his ribcage, spinal column, and pelvis into a guitar. Actor Gaten Matarazzo, who plays Dustin in Stranger Things, was born with a rare genetic condition called cleidocranial dysplasia, affecting the development of bones and teeth. The condition left him without collarbones, caused severe dental issues, and required multiple painful surgeries. He was initially rejected from acting roles due to his appearance and speech, as his future in entertainment looked quite grim until Stranger Things incorporated his condition into the character. In more severe cases, CCD can lead to skull malformations, fragile bones, and life-threatening complications. Gaten now uses his platform to raise awareness and support others living with the condition. Nanny Doss was a seemingly sweet, smiling woman who murdered at least 11 members of her own family between the 1920s and 50s. Her victims included 4 husbands, 2 children, her own mother, 2 sisters, 2 grandsons, and a mother-in-law, most of whom died mysteriously in their sleep or after sudden bouts of illness. Doss used arsenic-laced foods, poisoned drinks, and other subtle methods to kill, often collecting the insurance money of the victims after murdering them. When she was finally arrested in 1954, she giggled through her confessions, earning her the nickname the Giggling Granny. During McLovin's sex scene in Superbad, actor Christopher Mintz-Plasse had to have his mother present while filming due to legal requirements. The actor was only 17 years old at the time of filming, and California law mandates that a parent or guardian must be on set when a minor is involved in scenes of sexual nature. The U.S. Navy once banned tattoos it considered obscene, leading to a boom of tattoos of nude women on men who didn't want to serve. If they decided to serve later on, they had to have a tattoo artist dress the woman to meet Navy requirements. In 1999, Disney had to recall 3.4 million copies of the children's film The Rescuers because one of the animators inserted a picture of a nude woman into 2 frames of the movie. During the Apollo missions, NASA provided male astronauts with condom-like urination devices available in small, medium, and large sizes. However, due to apparent concerns about personal image, many astronauts opted for the largest size, leading to improper fits and urine leakage. To address this, NASA engineers humorously relabeled the sizes as large, gigantic, and humongous to encourage astronauts to choose the appropriate size. This has to be the strangest disorder I've ever heard of by far. Body integrity identity disorder is a rare neurological condition that causes the patient to believe that one or more of their limbs does not belong to them. This sense of disconnection often begins in early childhood, with sufferers reporting an intense and persistent desire to remove or disable the offending limb. Some patients become so distressed that they attempt self-amputation, using power tools, shotguns, or dry ice to damage the limb beyond repair. Renowned cricket historian Roland Bowen famously severed his own leg in 1968 while suffering from this disorder, and in the late 90s, Scottish surgeon Robert Smith controversially performed amputations on healthy patients who begged him to cut off one of their limbs. In many of these cases, patients report an indescribable sense of relief and psychological alignment following the removal of the unwanted limb. For them, the amputation is not a loss, but a long-sought correction in the harmony between their physical form and internal identity. Just last year, Nicolas Cage's son Weston was arrested after reportedly assaulting his mother, Christina Fulton. The woman says she rushed to Weston after hearing he set his apartment on fire, but upon her arrival, her furious son snapped, violently pulling her into an elevator by her hair before crushing and suffocating her. Fulton testified, "He shoved his thumb into my eye socket. The pain was excruciating. My vision went black. I was losing consciousness." She credited one of Weston's friends with potentially saving her life by intervening before the attack got too ugly. Weston was recently ordered to complete a 2-year mental health diversion program instead of serving prison time. In 2007, a man named Shannon Wisnant bought a storage unit at an auction in North Carolina, only to find a severed human leg when he opened the grill inside. He reported this to authorities, but soon decided he wanted to keep the leg and turn it into a money-making Halloween display for adults and children to pay to see. However, the man who the limb once belonged to caught wind of the story and said it was his own amputated leg that he lost in a plane crash and wanted to be buried with someday. After a long custody battle, the leg was eventually returned to its original owner. Bodybuilder Denise Rutkowski was once the runner-up for Miss Olympia in the mid-90s, but several years of steroid and drug abuse have led to quite a tragic downfall in her appearance. Someone brought this to a Mexican robotics competition and was disqualified immediately. Instead of improving working conditions and wages, Foxconn installed these safety nets throughout their locations in China to prevent workers from taking their lives. Foxconn is one of the world's largest contract electronics manufacturers and the largest producer of iPhones in the world. For 37 years, the mother of St. Louis man Adam Smith told him to never touch the wrapped box in their freezer, claiming it was filled with important relics from her wedding, including the topper for her cake. But when she passed away in 2019, Smith decided to finally investigate the box. And what he found was far more disturbing than he ever could have imagined: a pink blanket wrapped around a mummified dead baby. Very little is known about the infant other than that he was less than 1 year old, was wearing clothes from the 60s, and wasn't murdered. Smith remains haunted by the idea that it was likely the corpse of his baby brother that he never knew about. When Jimi Hendrix was 16, his mother died from a ruptured spleen at the young age of 33. But Jimi's father didn't allow him or his brother to attend the funeral. Instead, he gave them shots of whiskey and told them that this was how men should deal with a loss. After several hours of drinking on board a ferry, Englishwoman Emma Blackwell fell to her death. She'd apparently been imitating Kate Winslet's pose from the Titanic movie and lost her footing before plummeting from the ship. Smile mask syndrome is a psychological condition characterized by prolonged unnatural smiling. It can lead to painful strain of the facial muscles and result in an inability to stop smiling even when agitated or upset. In 1993, Missouri man James Scott damaged a levee on the Mississippi River simply to delay his wife from coming home so that he could party. Instead, the river ended up flooding over 14,000 acres, and the 23-year-old man was sentenced to life in prison for intentionally causing a catastrophe. Lauren Kreitzer was broke, depressed, and disabled after losing his leg in a car accident in 2007. But one day he saw a blanket valued at $500,000 on Antiques Roadshow and realized he had the exact same blanket. It was a Navajo blanket from the 1800s that he ended up selling for $1.5 million and quickly turned his life around. In 2010, Mexican singer Sergio Vega publicly denied a news report that he'd been murdered. 1 hour later, he was murdered. In 2001, Jason and Jenny Cairns Lawrence went on vacation in New York City when the World Trade Center was struck on 9/11. 4 years later, in 2005, they went on vacation in London when 4 suicide bombers attacked the London bus network, killing 52 people. Then in 2008, they were in Mumbai when once again, the city was attacked by 10 different terrorists who killed nearly 200 people. All 3 tragedies were the worst terrorist attacks in history for each of those countries. And now Jason and Jenny just stay home. When actor-comedian Red Fox was dying of a heart attack while on set, nobody offered to help him. This is because everyone thought it was nothing more than the fake heart attack act he was famous for. Hungarian man Adam Rayner was barely 4 feet tall for the first half of his life due to dwarfism. But during his 20s, a pituitary tumor caused a dramatic growth spurt, and by age 33, he was 7'2". He's the only person in recorded history to have been both a dwarf and a giant. Alexander I of Yugoslavia refused to make a public appearance on a Tuesday after 3 of his close family members died on a Tuesday. After finally being forced to appear on a Tuesday, he was promptly assassinated. In 1923, 22-year-old jockey Frank Hayes suffered a heart attack and died in the middle of a horse race. But his body remained on the saddle throughout the race as his horse Sweet Kiss crossed the finish line first. It was the first time Hayes had ever won a race. And the last. A 23-year-old college student from Taiwan was forced to have both of his legs amputated after suffering severe frostbite that his doctor couldn't believe was real. He claimed it was the result of being stuck outside after a bad motorcycle accident, but the truth was he'd stuck his legs in dry ice for more than 10 hours while trying to pull off a massive insurance fraud scheme. His friend and accomplice tied him to the chair, so he had no choice but to endure the excruciating ice burns. Instead of the $1.7 million payout they were hoping for, both of the young men were sent to prison for insurance fraud. This photo of Samantha Koenig was taken by serial killer Israel Keys to convince the victim's family that she was still alive, so that he could demand $30,000 in ransom from them for her safe return. But in reality, Koenig had already been dead for several weeks, and Keyes had sewn her eyes open using fishing line. The family paid some of the ransom before the killer dumped Samantha's body in a lake and never contacted them again. Freddie Mercury was known for his outrageously wild parties throughout the 70s and 80s. In 1978, he threw a party in New Orleans that featured nude waiters and waitresses, naked models wrestling in a mud pit, and dwarves walking around with trays of cocaine strapped to their heads. The butt plug was invented and patented by Dr. Frank Young in 1892. He marketed them as a cure for various conditions including acne, headaches, and insanity. King Charles II of England had a wig made out of the pubic hair of his mistresses. King George IV later attempted to make one of his own but died before he completed it. F. Scott Fitzgerald, author of The Great Gatsby, was once told by his wife Zelda that he had a small package. Feeling inadequate, he confessed this to his friend Ernest Hemingway. So Hemingway told Fitzgerald to meet him in the bathroom, where he took a look at his member and told him it was perfectly fine. The 1985 film Mask is based on the true story of Rocky Dennis, an American boy with an extremely rare bone disorder. It causes bone to build up excessively in the skull, resulting in compression of the brain. Doctors initially told him he would die before his 7th birthday, but Rocky ended up living to the age of 16. After being told he would die if he didn't change his habits, a morbidly obese Scottish man went an entire year without eating any food. The 450-pound 27-year-old only consumed multivitamins and potassium tablets for 382 days, only going number 2 once every 40 to 50 days. He set a record for the longest fast ever recorded and ended up losing 275 pounds. French chemist Antoine Lavoisier wanted to perform one last experiment before he was executed in 1792. He told his colleague he would try to blink as long as possible after being beheaded by a guillotine. Some sources say he continued to blink for up to 10 seconds afterwards. In 2002, Pennsylvania mother Brenda Heist completely disappeared after dropping her 2 kids off at school. 11 years later, she was found living with a group of homeless people in Key West, Florida. Investigators found out she was upset about an upcoming divorce and wanted to completely abandon her life as she knew it. Brenda survived by living under bridges and eating scraps of food until she got tired of running and decided to turn herself in. Her family wanted nothing to do with her since they thought she'd been dead for years, and her ex-husband was even treated as a suspect for her supposed murder. Just last year, 16-year-old Marie Antoinette Coutillo tragically died after her phone fell into the bathtub while she was on a call with her friend. She'd been charging her phone while using it and apparently dropped it in the water at some point, resulting in her electrocution. Marie was eventually found unresponsive by her parents and rushed to the hospital, but doctors were unable to save her. In 1973, 16-year-old John Paul Getty III was kidnapped in Rome, with a $17 million ransom demanded from his billionaire grandfather, J. Paul Getty. But the former richest man in the world refused to pay, suspecting that the rebellious teenager was just trying to extract money from his tycoon grandfather. As time went on, the teenager's father pleaded with his dad to send the money, but the mogul argued that his 13 other grandchildren could also become kidnap targets if he paid. However, he was forced to change his tune when the kidnappers mailed Getty his grandson's severed ear and hair as a warning, so the billionaire negotiated the ransom down to $3 million. Paul was safely released after 5 months in captivity, but the experience left him completely traumatized, especially since his captors made him play Russian roulette several times. The teen quickly developed a drug addiction, which eventually led to a stroke caused by an overdose, and Getty was left severely disabled for the rest of his life. Wonder Woman was created by a polyamorous male kinkster who was married to 2 bisexual women. The character was originally made to represent an overtly kinky sex symbol for women, and was nearly cancelled from the start because of how explicitly she was being depicted. The throuple was also heavily into bondage, which supposedly inspired Wonder Woman's rope. Edgar Allan Poe married his first cousin Virginia when she was 13 years old and he was 27. The pair first met when Virginia was only 7 while Edgar was 21. Former Vice President Nelson Rockefeller suffered a heart attack and died while having intercourse with his 25-year-old assistant. He was 70 years old at the time. Most famous for his 6 different marriages, King Henry VIII hired 4 men to regularly check his feces, monitor his bowel movements, and wipe his bottom. They were known as the grooms of the King's Stool, and all of them were eventually knighted. Benjamin Franklin reportedly had a big thing for gilfs. He once wrote a long, detailed letter to his friend telling him all the benefits of having an older woman as a mistress. His reasons included they are more thankful for the attention, they're more adventurous than younger women, they are experienced and need not be trained. He was also very clear that the face ages, but the downstairs does not. 1993, Ron Jeremy played Mario in a corno that parodied the video game franchise. It's called Super Hornio Brothers, and Nintendo owns all the rights. Anton von Leeuwenhoek was known as the father of microbiology. The first thing he ever put under a microscope was his own man milk, which led to his discovery of sperm. Before this, there were some rather questionable theories as to how babies were made, including the belief that trouser gravy contained really tiny humans that were transferred to the woman during intercourse. Anton fully expected to see tiny babies in his population paste. 1969, Super Freak singer Rick James once had such a bad hangover that he was unable to attend a small party thrown by his friends Jay Sebring and Sharon Tate. But the hangover ended up saving his life, since that night, all 5 occupants of the home would end up being murdered by the Manson family. In 1999, Richard Anthony Jones was convicted of a felony even though he had a strong alibi. He spent 17 years in prison until police found and arrested his doppelganger who was living in the same town with the same first name. In 1995, a man named Terry Cottle turned the gun on himself. Terry's heart was then donated to Sonny Graham, who ended up marrying his donor's widow. Soon enough, people started to notice that Sonny was taking on some of Terry's traits. He started liking things that he'd never enjoyed before, like beer and hot dogs, which were some of Terry's favorites. A few years later, Sonny would end up dying in the exact same way as his donor, by turning the gun on himself. Moments of True Horror, Part 1. In 2019, 74-year-old Phoenix grandmother Catalin Metro had to be airlifted from a hiking trail after tripping and breaking her nose. But within mere seconds of being lifted off the ground, she quickly found herself in a horrific situation. Apparently, wind from the rotor blades hit Metro's body at the perfect angle to send her body spinning, eventually getting ridiculously fast. Metro said she thought she was going to die as it felt like her eyeballs were popping out of her skull while she had no idea what was happening. She did her best to control her breathing and managed to stay conscious for the entire rescue. When the chopper finally landed, Metro's face was completely black from all the blood vessels that burst as she spun. The woman says she spent nearly a month in a rehabilitation facility after suffering numerous injuries and ended up winning $450K in a civil lawsuit just recently. The disaster apparently happened as a result of several failures in the rescue team's compliance with safety standards. In 1989, Canadian hockey player Duncan McPherson completely vanished at an Austrian ski resort. 14 years later, in 2003, his mangled body and snowboard were found in the ice on the mountain, showing severe injuries consistent with machinery impact. Investigators concluded that he was accidentally run over by a snowcat and buried in a small gap, where his body remained hidden for more than a decade until the glacier started to melt. Mississippi man Jimmy Lee Gray was sentenced to death by gas chamber after kidnapping, sexually assaulting, and murdering a 3-year-old girl. When the gas was released, Lee began bashing his head against a metal pole behind the chair. The toxic fumes had failed to kill him quickly, leaving him gasping in agony for nearly 10 minutes. In 2021, zipline instructor Joaquin Romero tragically fell to his death after sacrificing himself for a customer. Realizing the zipline couldn't support both of their weights, he released himself to save the client. 4. The first known photograph of a person was taken in Paris in 1838. It only happened because a man and his shoe shiner were the only people still enough on a busy street to show up in the 10-minute exposure. Aerial photographer Robert Haas was taking photos over the Yucatan when he captured something spectacular. A bunch of flamingos were hanging out in the shape of a giant flamingo. Here's an extremely rare photo of a schema monk outside of Mount Athos in Greece. These monks have taken the highest level of monastic vows, characterized by a profound commitment to spiritual practices and typically a much greater seclusion from the outside world. This extremely rare polka-dotted zebra foal was photographed in Kenya last year. Here's a colorized photo of the last known Tasmanian tiger Benjamin at the Hobart Zoo in 1936. The species officially went extinct when Benjamin was accidentally locked outside of his sleeping quarters on a cold Tasmanian night and tragically froze to death. 5 days before her wedding in September of 2009, Yale medical student Annie Lee suddenly went missing in the basement of a Yale laboratory. On the actual day she was supposed to get married, her body was found hanging upside down inside a wall cavity in the building. Her murderer, a lab technician who worked in the building, was eventually caught and sentenced to 44 years in prison. After his phone was stolen in 2020, 16-year-old Kevin Bui set a Denver house on fire that he mistakenly thought was the thief's home. The blaze tragically killed 5 members of an innocent family, including 2 young kids. Bui was tried as an adult and sentenced to 60 years in prison. After suffering a stroke in 2010, UK woman Sarah Colwell started speaking with a Chinese accent despite never even visiting China. No matter how hard she tries, Sarah can't return to her normal voice. She became one of less than 100 people to ever be diagnosed with foreign accent syndrome, a rare neurological condition caused by damage to the speech part of the brain. This is the harrowing skull of a man with Proteus syndrome, a rare and awful condition characterized by the overgrowth of skin, organs, tissues, and bones. Nikola Tesla originally expected to live to the age of 150, but later lowered this estimate to 135 years when he was forced to give up alcohol due to prohibition. He thought that consuming alcohol was good for the body and was a heavy drinker as a result. Tesla ended up dying at the age of 86. When revolutionary hero Guy Fawkes was convicted of high treason in 1605, his punishment was to be hanged, drawn, and quartered, meaning he would be hanged almost to the point of death, have his intestines and sex organs removed while still alive, decapitated, and have his limbs torn off. After the sentencing, Fawkes said "fuck that" and leapt from the gallows so that the rope broke his neck and killed him immediately. The drawing and quartering was still performed on his corpse, and his body parts were paraded around London. After filming Psycho, actress Janet Leigh was so terrified of showers that she only took baths for 35 straight years. On the extremely rare occasion that she did take a shower, she made sure that every door in the house was locked and left the shower curtain open. While filming for Resident Evil 5, there was an accident on set that left 16 people injured. Their zombie costumes were so gory that first responders on the scene had a very difficult time assessing the injuries. The woman who voiced the demon Pazuzu in the original Exorcist had a son who murdered his whole family before turning the gun on himself. He did all of this while wearing a Freddy Krueger mask. Speaking of The Exorcist, one of the actors in the film went on to become an actual serial killer. Paul Bateson, who plays a nurse in the film, eventually confessed to the killing and dismembering of 6 gay men throughout the 1970s. But he was released on parole in 2004 after serving only 5 years in prison. In 2021, Tessica Brown ran out of her regular hairspray, so she tried using Gorilla Glue spray instead. Her hair then became stuck to her scalp for more than a month, despite hundreds of attempts to wash it out. Brown says she felt so helpless that she stopped eating and lost more than 10 pounds over a short span. Eventually, a plastic surgeon performed a 4-hour-long surgery on her for free to remove the adhesive. Once described as a genius, Russian man Anatoly Moskvin was a well-respected linguist and historian until he was discovered to be living with the corpses of 26 girls in his parents' home. He apparently dug them up from local cemeteries before mummifying and dressing them like dolls. Anatoly's parents were well aware of the dolls but had no idea they contained real human corpses. After his arrest, Moskvin stated that he had great sympathy for the dead children and believed that one day they could be brought back to life through science or black magic. He's been forced to live in a mental hospital since 2012. After reportedly losing custody of her kids for child cruelty, 36-year-old Florida woman Tara Sykes managed to communicate with her 10-year-old daughter through Roblox and used the online game's chat feature to encourage the girl to murder her 2-month-old sibling. The woman allegedly instructed her daughter to drop the baby on a hard tile floor, scald him in boiling hot water, and drown him in the bathtub. The infant suffered serious injuries after being dropped on the floor, but thankfully survived. Sykes also instructed the girl to kill her temporary guardians by slitting their throats as they slept and dousing their sheets with aerosol spray before setting them on fire. The 10-year-old girl doused the sheets but was unable to carry out the rest of the instructions. The disturbing messages were eventually uncovered during an investigation, and Sykes is facing a multitude of charges. The child allegedly told authorities that she's terrified of her mother and thought the woman would kill her if she didn't follow the instructions. Known for his legendary role of Cousin Eddie in the National Lampoon's Vacation movies, American actor Randy Quaid has faced a bevy of legal issues over the years. In 2009, he and his wife Evie were arrested for allegedly using a fake credit card to pay a $10,000 hotel bill. The next year, the couple was arrested again after spending 5 days in a guest house on a property they once owned in Cali. Facing felony vandalism charges, they fled to Canada seeking asylum, claiming they were gonna be murdered by a group of Hollywood star whackers. The couple was later detained by Canadian immigration officials but eventually released. They now permanently reside in Burlington, Vermont, and still maintain that they were victims of a dark Hollywood conspiracy. During the 2014 filming of Muppets Most Wanted, Danny Trejo's mom suddenly passed away. The actor managed to hold it together when everyone on set gave him their condolences. But when Kermit the Frog offered his own sympathies, Trejo ran to the bathroom bawling his eyes out. An Italian mafia hitman named Edgardo Greco killed 2 mob rivals with a crowbar before fleeing to France. He went on the run for more than 30 years until he was discovered working as a prestigious pizza chef. Greco's food became so famous thanks to his homemade recipes that he was featured in the local newspaper, resulting in his cover being blown. This 4,600-year-old Egyptian statue was made completely from wood other than the quartz and copper that make up its eyeballs. It's just one example of the incredible level of craftsmanship achieved during ancient times. These are the first ever drawings of the moon made by Galileo after observing it through his telescope in 1690. Here's a before and after of the excavation of an ancient Greek stadium located in modern-day Turkey. It was built around 1st century AD and once held a capacity of 30,000 people. This is the impressive flexibility of a Swedish knight sabaton from 1560. This is a watch that once belonged to a Japanese man named Akito Kawagoe. It's permanently stopped at 8:15 since that was the exact time the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima in 1945. A woman snorkeling near Australia noticed this fish was wearing a gold wedding ring. She said she tried to catch it, but it swam away too quickly. A man named Walter Summerford was struck by lightning 3 times throughout his life. After his death, his grave was also struck. This person was saved from a $300 fine thanks to this absolute bro of a bird blocking their license plate from the camera. Tom Cruise divorced all 3 of his ex-wives when they turned 33, and each is 11 years younger than the last. A woman from Michigan gave birth on 8808, 9909, and 101010. The odds of this happening were 50 million to 1. This baby girl was born with the same exact white patch of hair as her mother. Anne Hathaway's husband bears a strong resemblance to William Shakespeare. Not to mention the name of Shakespeare's wife was Anne Hathaway.